Let's be honest, the 1980s were a dark time for horsepower. The Mustang was slow, the Camaro was heavy, and if you wanted real speed, you had to buy a Chevy Corvette. That was the rule at General Motors. Nothing beats the Corvette. But there was one car that didn't care about the rules. I'm talking about the Buick Grand National. To most people, it looked like your grandfather's grocery getter. But under that boxy hood was a turbo V6 monster that put the fear of God into V8 owners. In my opinion, this isn't just the best 80s muscle car ever built. It's the biggest scam in automotive history. Why? Because the legendary Buick GNX was actually faster than a Ferrari, but GM lied about the numbers to protect the Corvette's ego. Let's find out why. To understand why the Grand National was such a shock to the world, you have to understand just how depressing the American car market was in the early 1980s. This was the Malaise era. Emission regulations had strangled the life out of Detroit's V8s. The Ford Mustang GT was struggling to make 175 horsepower. The Chevy Camaro Z28 was choked by smog pumps. And if you walked into a Buick dealership, things were even worse. Buick was known as the doctor's car. It was the brand you bought when you were ready to retire to Florida. Their lineup was full of soft, comfortable land yachts with velour seats and wire wheel hubcaps. But behind the scenes, Buick had a secret. In 1981 and 1982, Buick was dominating the NASCAR circuit. They won the Manufacturers' Cup back-to-back, beating Ford and Chevy on the track. Lloyd Roos, the general manager of Buick, looked at his boring showroom and got angry. He wanted a street car that celebrated their racing dominance. He wanted a muscle car. But there was a problem, a big one. General Motors had a strict corporate policy known as the Corvette ban. No division, not Pontiac, not Oldsmobile, and certainly not Buick, was allowed to build an engine more powerful than the Corvette's V8. If Buick wanted to build a fast car, they couldn't use a V8. They were stuck with their humble, economy-focused 3.8-liter V6. Most engineers would have given up. But the team at Buick decided to get creative. Everything changed in 1986. Buick engineers redesigned the entire induction system. They added a massive air-to-air intercooler mounted right in front of the engine fan. This was the game changer. The intercooler chilled the hot air coming from the turbo, making it denser and richer in oxygen. With colder air, they could turn up the boost. They paired this with a state-of-the-art sequential fuel injection (SFI) system and a coil pack ignition that replaced the old-school distributor. Suddenly, the grandpa engine woke up. On paper, General Motors stated that the 1987 Grand National made 245 horsepower and 355 pound-feet of torque. But here is the open secret that every Buick owner knows. GM was lying. If Buick had printed the real horsepower numbers, the executives at Chevrolet would have canceled the project immediately. In reality, stock Grand Nationals were putting down closer to 290 or 300 horsepower at the crank. But horsepower is just a number. Torque is what you feel, and the Grand National made torque like a diesel truck. To handle this violence, Buick couldn't use a normal transmission. They had to equip the car with the heavy-duty TH204R 4-speed automatic, the only gearbox in the Buick parts bin that wouldn't explode when the turbo spooled up. By 1987, the recipe was perfected. They had the engine, they had the transmission. Now, they just needed to make it look evil. In the late 1980s, car design was all about flash. The Corvette was bright red. The Camaro IROC Z had gold stripes. Chrome was everywhere. Buick went the complete opposite direction. For the 1987 Grand National, they introduced the WE4 package, which eventually became the standard look. They deleted every single piece of chrome. The bumpers? Black. The grille? Black. The headlight bezels? Black. The result was menacing. It didn't look like a car, it looked like a weapon. The automotive press immediately gave it a nickname that stuck forever: Darth Vader's car. One famous magazine cover simply showed the grille with the caption, "Lord Vader, your car is ready." But the genius of the Grand National wasn't just the exterior, it was the contrast. If you opened the door, you were greeted by a standard Buick interior. It had plush, two-tone gray and black velour seats. It had a horizontal speedometer that stopped at 85 miles per hour. It was quiet, comfortable, and smelled like a library. This was the ultimate definition of a sleeper. You could pick up your grandmother for church on Sunday morning. and then go to the drag strip and destroy a Porsche 911 on Sunday afternoon. And destroy them, it did. On the street, the Grand National became an urban legend. Because it wasn't automatic with a turbo, you could hold the brake and gas at the same time to build boost at the line. When the light turned green, the Buick didn't spin its tires like a Corvette. It just launched. It would leave exotic supercars staring at its square taillights, wondering how they just lost to a V6 Regal. But Buick wasn't done yet. 1987 was scheduled to be the final year of the rear-wheel drive G-body platform. General Motors had decided that the future was front-wheel drive. The Regal was going to be replaced by a boring family sedan. Buick engineers knew this was the end of the line. They wanted to send the Grand National out with a bang, a final mic drop that nobody would ever forget. So, they secretly partnered with ASC McLaren. Yes, that McLaren, the company famous for building Formula One race cars. They took 547 fully loaded Grand Nationals straight off the assembly line and shipped them to McLaren's facility. This created the holy grail of 80s muscle, the GNX, or Grand National Experimental. McLaren didn't just add stickers. They reinvented the car. They swapped the standard turbo for a specialized Garrett T3 with a ceramic impeller, which was lighter and spooled up instantly. They added a larger intercooler and reprogrammed the transmission for harder shifts. They added functional vents on the fenders to pull heat out of the engine bay, vents that are now iconic, but the biggest change was underneath. McLaren ripped out the standard suspension and installed a massive ladder bar and panhard rod setup. This race car suspension physically planted the rear tires into the pavement during a launch, lifting the rear end of the car up instead of squatting down. The result was violence. When Car and Driver magazine got their hands on the GNX in 1987, they couldn't believe the numbers on their stopwatch. Remember, this was 1987. A Ferrari Testarossa, a V12 Italian supercar that cost over $100,000, did 0 to 60 in about 5.2 seconds. The Porsche 930 Turbo did it in 5.0 seconds. The flagship Corvette took nearly 5.9 seconds. The Buick GNX? It hit 60 miles per hour in 4.7 seconds. It ran the quarter mile in 13.5 seconds at 102 miles per hour. Let that sink in. A boxy. 3,500-pound Buick with a V6 engine and a back seat large enough for 3 adults was faster than the greatest supercars in the world. It was the quickest production car you could buy in America that year. The automotive world was in shock. Buick, the brand for retirees, had built a supercar killer. But not everyone was celebrating. Over at Chevrolet headquarters, executives were furious. Their crown jewel, the Corvette, had been publicly humiliated by its own corporate cousin. The Corvette rule had been broken in the most aggressive way possible. The GNX was a triumph, but it was also a funeral. Just as the car hit the streets and became a legend, General Motors swung the axe. The rear-wheel drive G-body platform was officially canceled at the end of 1987. Some say it was simply scheduled obsolescence, but conspiracy theorists and GM insiders believe the Grand National was killed because it was too good. It proved that Buick engineers could outsmart the massive budget of the Corvette team with nothing but a turbo and some clever engineering. In 1988, the new Buick Regal debuted. It was front-wheel drive. It had no turbo. It was slow, boring, and safe. The rebellion was over. General Motors had successfully fixed the problem. The Corvette was the king again, simply because the Challenger had been executed. Today, the Buick Grand National and GNX are some of the most sought-after collector cars in the world. A clean GNX can easily sell for over $150,000. Sometimes reaching $250,000 at auction. Why? Because we know we will never see a car like this again. It was a glitch in the matrix. A moment in time where the boring corporate rules were broken by a group of engineers who just wanted to go fast. General Motors tried to bury the legend. They tried to protect the Corvette. But they couldn't hide the truth. For one glorious year in 1987, the fastest car in America wasn't a Ferrari, and it wasn't a Chevy. It was a Buick. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you rather have a 1987 Corvette or a Grand National? I think I know the answer. Thanks for watching AutoAcademy, and I'll see you in the next one.